Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I'm happy to introduce you to our next guest. His name is Nikhil Handigol. Nikhil joins us, I believe, from Santa Clara, out in the Valley today. Nikhil, it's great to have you on. Welcome to Techstrong TV.
Hi, Alan. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Pleasure. Now, Nikhil is the co-founder, and pay attention here, Chief AI Officer at a company called Forward Networks. Nikhil, first of all, congratulations on founding or co-founding Forward Networks. We're going to hear about your role as a Chief AI Officer, but I'm sure people out here are asking, how did he become a Chief AI Officer? What's his background? What's his journey been like that he's a Chief AI Officer? Tell us.
Yeah, happy to. So just quick introduction again. My name is Nikhil Handigol. I'm the Chief AI Officer and co-founder at Forward Networks. And very quick background, prior to Forward, my co-founders and I did our PhDs at Stanford University, where we built some of the foundational pieces of software-defined networking. And past that, so we started Forward Networks 12 years ago. And it's been an amazing journey for the last 12 years. And as a co-founder, I've had to wear multiple hats, as you would imagine a co-founder would need to do, and like over this long journey of 12 plus years. And off late, my role is that of a Chief AI Officer, as you rightly pointed. And what that means is I head our AI strategy and execution within Forward, and that comes in two different flavors. One is external from a product perspective. I help. I am spearheading our agentic AI capabilities that we are building into the Forward platform, and internally, so that's the other side of my job, which is internally, I am also being an evangelist and spearheading the adoption of AI within Forward Networks as an organization.
Excellent. So another overnight sensation 12 years later, huh?
You could say that. Just 12 years.
Absolutely. So Nikhil, I've had, the joy of co-founding a few companies myself over the years, and I know, the commitment, and you talk about wearing multiple hats and how roles evolve over the years. 12 years ago, did you envision that you would need a Chief AI Officer, right, doing software-defined networking?
To be honest, no. I think back in the day, AI was not as mainstream as it is today. So today, like it looks like a completely different world these days. Back in the day, who would have known?
Well, 12 years ago, when we talked about AI, we were probably talking more about machine learning, pattern recognition, those kinds of things. And those were already real, quite frankly, 12 years ago, right? We had companies doing that. And just coincidentally, I think it was 12 years ago that I started Techstrong, Mediops, the corporate name, 2014, right? So it's March will be 12 years. So it was definitely out there. Let's build our way up to Chief AI Officer. Forward Network starts as an SDN company, right? And that was all the rage, right? Talk to us about this journey that Forward, and you as part of it, has been on from software-defined networking 12 years ago to where we are today with the announcement of Forward AI.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, so we started Forward 12 years ago. And when we started Forward, our mission was to make the world's networks agile, predictable, and secure. And that mission has not changed in the last 12 years. It's remained exactly the same. And all of this stems from the observation that while networks today have become more critical than ever, and that criticality is only increasing over time, their complexity has surpassed human capacity. And with the increasing adoption of AI these days, the demand and expectation of our networks is only increasing. And so going forward, our networks will need to be more robust, more reliable, more secure, higher performant than ever before. And the fundamental gap or problem that we had observed then, and has mostly held true to this day as well, is that while our networks have become more critical, while they're becoming more complex than ever before, the way we have operated our networks has largely remained the same. The fundamental weapons, tools in our arsenal, they have not changed significantly. We still talk about monitoring, we still talk about observability, we still talk about pings and traceroute, like the tools that were invented back in the 80s and 90s. That there hasn't been a fundamentally different way to tame the network complexity, and that's the problem we set out to solve.
Excellent. Excellent. So, well, before we go further, let me get some housekeeping out of the way, Nikhil. For people who want to get more information on Forward Networks, what's the best place to send them?
The best place to go would be to our website, forwardnetworks.com. And there are multiple ways to engage with the team and the platform. Once you go to forwardnetworks.com, you can go request a demo, and one of our teammates would be happy to work with you and get your demo. There is also something called Forward Quest, which is a self-directed way to get your hands on the Forward digital twin platform, which I'll talk about a little bit soon. So that would be another way to do it. Or we have our YouTube channel where we have a lot of videos about the product, about the technology, about the problem. So that would be another way to get to know about Forward.
I love it. Good. Thanks for providing that. Let's fast forward to today, right? It seems to be all AI all the time, right? And in some ways, rightfully so, right? Because the potential for not just disruption, but for progress, for fundamentally changing the equation, not just in technology, but our day-to-day lives, in jobs, in how we accomplish things. Where there's smoke, there's fire usually. So I'm not saying AI is going to do everything that everyone says it might do. I don't know if it'll ever achieve, super intelligence or AGI. But what it could do right now is pretty darn amazing, right? Let's talk about Forward AI and how you over at Forward Networks have kind of harnessed this, and if you can't beat them, join them, right? And brought it in to be part of the solution you guys offer.
Yeah, I would love to. Just a little bit of quick background on where all of this is coming from. I mean, AI has touched pretty much every industry as we know today, and most industries are undergoing a transformational shift. And networking as an industry is no different. Networking and security. If you look at the industry is looking at something called agentic operations. This is a world where autonomous and semi-autonomous agents will perform most of day-to-day network options. Again, with it wherever appropriate, and like that's the future that this industry as a whole is envisioning. But if you're talking about agents operating critical infrastructure like the network, then our position is that those agents need to be built on the right foundation. And there are two key pillars as far as we the way we think to this foundation: data and trust. Agents can be only as good as the data that they have access to, and if you expect agents to operate and take actions in critical infrastructure like the network, then we better have a way to trust what the agents are doing. That's a quick background of where all of this is coming from. And we recently announced Forward AI. It's a conversational agentic system to accelerate operations, but importantly with safety. It's built on the foundation of a mathematically accurate digital twin of the network. So what is Forward AI? It's a conversational interface. So our users are network operators, security operators, cloud operators. So users can come in and express their goals or their questions or the tasks that they intend to perform within the network in natural language. And under the hood, there is an AI agent, or it's a system of AI agents, in fact. It's an AI agent that understands what the user is trying to do, and it reasons based on the knowledge that it has from the mathematically accurate digital twin of the network, and builds a plan in response to that, and dynamically executes through that via a multi-step workflow. So that's how, at a high level, Forward AI works. It's an agentic system that is capable of performing these multi-step workflows somewhat, mostly autonomously, with a conversational interface with the user.
Excellent. I love it. You know what I like about it, Nikhil? So many people today are looking at AI and, I don't know whether they have visions of sugar plums or gold dust, but they're like going all in on AI, but not building on what came before. They're just, let's tear that all down and start fresh with AI. Or do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where
Yeah.
this seems to be more of, hey, we've been doing this for 12 years. We've seen what our customers want. We've seen what works, what doesn't work. Let's thoughtfully bring some AI into the equation where it makes sense to improve the overall. But your mission didn't change. You know what I'm saying? The vision didn't change. The tools have gotten better, and that's great, right? But Forward Networks, the mission really hasn't changed drastically. It's just, as I said, the tools. And that, I think, isn't, no pun intended, an intelligent use of AI, right? To holistically, organically sort of graft it onto what you do, and don't just burn down the forest and plant new trees. Wondering, what have you heard from customers on this?
Yeah, I really like what you said, and like I want to just double click on that a little bit.
Go ahead.
So we didn't start with AI and look for a problem to solve.
Right.
And so we've spent more than a decade building the foundational truths, the foundation that is needed to truly understand, truly know what the network is doing, how the network behaves. And AI is an accelerant on top. And again, as you rightly said, Alan, right? So there is kind of a myth in some circles going around that AI is this magical thing. So I mean, like as a concrete example, right? There is some thinking in some circles that you can just like pull in some data, right? So just like pull in some raw data, or like, and then slap AI on top, and magic will happen. And the truth is, that is definitely not the case. Definitely not the case when it comes to complex infrastructure like the network, where the behavior can be extremely complex, and the importance of the answers and the outcomes are much, much higher than if you used AI to write an email or have it compose a poem. Like we're talking about critical infrastructure here. And therefore, being disciplined and thoughtful about how you build these AI capabilities, these agentic capabilities, becomes even more important.
I think I was also Nikhil. One good turn deserves another. That was also very insightful and a good way of looking at it. Hey, you know what? The time here goes quick, unfortunately. We don't have a lot more. I want to, unfortunately, because I'd like to talk to you more about, the meat of this, but people may have questions. How do, as you said, you go to the website, people on your team can show them demos and everything else. How else can they interact with Forward? Right? LinkedIn, any shows you're going to be at coming up or anything like that, conferences?
Yeah, we were just in Europe recently, just last week at Cisco Live EMEA.
Yeah.
And and then shortly in the near future, we'll be at the RSA conference in the Bay Area. Yes. And so if you happen to be there, please stop by. We are.
So
really nice booth there. So please stop by the Forward Networks booth. And we'll be at Cisco Live in the US end of May as well. That would be in Las Vegas. And again, we'll have a strong presence there. Please do stop by the booth and engage with the crew. And we'd be happy to tell you everything about the digital twin technology, about forward AI, about everything else that we are building as well.
That sounds like a great thing. We are going to be at RSA. We'll be at Broadcast Alley on Moscone West all week, streaming live.
Wonderful.
We'll have your people talk to my people, or we'll have your AI talk to my AI, and we'll see if we can set something up to see you all there. We actually are putting on a seminar in Moscone on Monday. This is the 10th year we're doing it with RSA. Usually it was on DevSecOps, but this year it's on securing AI native dev. We've got some great speakers as well. So if you're there, we're in Moscone West all week. I'd love to talk with you. Cisco Live, I know our sister company, Tech Field Day, is there doing a Tech Field Day in Vegas, I believe, at Cisco Live. Again, I'll have my AI talk to your AI about it, but it sounds like we're going to be overlapping some places. I think there might be one other one too here. About a demo request. You're going to be doing demos at these conferences and so forth, or?
We will be doing a lot of demos at these conferences. We'll have a big team from Forward Networks who would love to show you demos of the platform. But again, if you're not at these conferences, you can always go to the website and request for a demo, and one of our team members would be happy to reach out back to you and show you what the technology is, what it can do for you.
Perfect. Nikhil, I appreciate you coming on and telling people a little bit about you, a lot about Forward Networks, a lot about Forward AI. I wish you a lot of success, and may the next 12 years be even better than the last 12. And hopefully maybe we'll see you in either Vegas or San Francisco.
Thank you so much, Alan. It was a pleasure talking to you, and looking forward to meeting with you and the team at one of these conferences.
Nikhil Handigol, co-founder, Chief AI Officer at Forward Networks here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Dhawal Sharma, who's Executive Vice President for Product Strategy for Zscaler. And we're talking about their latest acquisition, SquareX, which kind of addresses some of these AI browser security issues we've been talking about. Dhawal, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me over, Mike.
All right. So let's just jump right in, but everybody kind of knows the portfolio you guys have, but where does this latest acquisition fit and what is the issues we're trying to address?
Yeah, so if you look from a typical enterprise user or a supply chain user like third-party contractors perspective, browser is an important tool in an enterprise user's day-to-day work. And attackers are trying to compromise users by embedding attacks such as last-mile reassembly, tricking users to download malicious extensions in user browsing behaviors that are not caught by traditional security tools such as firewalls or even EDRs. By integrating the SquareX technology with Zero Trust Exchange, especially with our Zero Trust browser, Zscaler provides flexibility to secure actual browsers that employees and your users are using, like Microsoft Edge, Chrome, Firefox, and so on, and provide advanced browser detection response capabilities to protect users from threat in this AI era. That comes integrated with our cloud browser in the for the unmanaged devices to elevate user experience and protect users when they're using applications and are building new apps with AIs, especially in developer use cases. This form factor is pretty extensible, especially when you think about customers are trying to not rely on a single browser and be tied into a closed ecosystem, but have flexibility either to not use a enterprise browser, use any browser of their choice with the embedded extension that SquareX provides, as well as Zscaler's fully containerized browser in the cloud, which is a Chromium-based browser, and in future being able to run a full browser on their device as well.
Mm-hmm. So does this work primarily with your secure browser, or can it work with any browser?
It can work with any browser. So one of the thing that we focused on while were doing diligence was that it is it works with all the common browsers that are available in the market. So you can integrate it using a standard MDM or push it on a user's device, or users can download it themselves as an extension, and then extended controls become available. For example, for unmanaged devices where you have no control, as well as for managed devices both. So as you know, as part of Zero Trust Exchange, our platform has a agent, our client connector, that sends all traffic to the device with the full user context and the device context. But for unmanaged devices, you want similar control when your third-party users or your employees are working on BYOD. Most organizations rely on expensive technologies like VDI, which are not secure either. So using this SquareX technology, we can embed controls inside any browser with advanced browser detection response capabilities now.
Mm. So there are now a fair number of these browsers that are out there. Do you think the people who are using these fully appreciate the security risks that go with this? Because it seems like it's relatively trivial to create something that feels like an indirect malicious prompt and convince the browser to do all kinds of weird things.
Yeah. So I think there was a big spike in what is known as the enterprise browsing space in the last couple of years. One thing which we continuously hear from CXOs is that while they had no proper way to, extend enterprise control to protect their apps on unmanaged devices, they would still prefer to use not use yet another client, which is a full browser that employees are not comfortable with, and gives them a different client to manage on unmanaged devices compared to flexibility of end users using their devices to connect to their application. But then security becomes a point of worry because you don't know what is the security posture of that device. With SquareX technology now available, we can actually which is also getting fully integrated with our Zscaler private access stack, where you can actually publish applications to third parties, contractors, or employees using personal devices. You can have a browser extension they can download, and then they can access all the applications with the full device posture, have ability to do data leakage prevention, especially against browser and Gen AI data leakage, clipboard data leakage, files that people can transfer from their device, or redaction of sensitive content on third-party devices. All of those use cases are also supported. And there's a series of attacks that can also be controlled with this, both on managed and unmanaged devices. For example, malicious extensions, or extensions that trick users that they are AI extensions, or AI extensions themselves. If they become over permissive, they can exfiltrate data, and we can actually catch those. And that's the kind of attacks like identity-based OAuth attacks, or spear phishing attacks, or last mile reassembly attacks. We are able to protect them, in addition to how Zscaler always sits in line and protect you with traffic that comes through us.
Mhm. Um, are we kind of ahead of our skis here in terms of adoption of these AI tools and our security policies? It feels like a lot of the security people are once again trying to catch up to an emerging technology, and this one may have more risk than previous generations of emerging technologies. But where are we on this journey?
Yeah. So I think on the AI side, where we are today is organizations have, I think in the last couple of years, have matured to create what we call a whitelisted approach to allowing certain enterprise AI applications, whether they are for the developers, like IDE environments like Devin and Windsurf and Claude. Um, and Also at Zscaler, we have more than 3,000 apps that we today categorize as AI applications, in addition to more than 12,000 domains that are in AI classification already. I think the challenge we are seeing is the AI apps that your employees are using on a day-to-day basis are ever growing. There is also embedded AI inside the traditional SaaS applications like Office 365 or Agentforce, and even inside common websites, like you are seeing AI agents being deployed at scale. So the risk of AI exfiltrating data or compromising your enterprise assets is growing significantly. So for our customers, one thing we have been able to do in terms of enabling responsible use of AI is that our customers can transparently to the end users can redirect traffic to our Zero Trust browser in the cloud, where uh, you can allow use of ChatGPT for personal productivity, but people can't copy, paste, upload, download, or for example, take screenshots of content. That kind of controls happen there. Now, with another challenge is that people download these extensions that run inside their browsers. We can create a whitelist of browser extensions that they can use and also detect permissions or over permission of these AI app-based extensions. And also, some of these extensions could be side-loaded with additional code and provide risky vectors. So we can block the side-loaded extension and look for like name spoofing. Like if you have a malicious app which is causing the extension as ChatGPT, we can detect those things. So extending the controls, I would say we had the capability to protect them earlier. Now we are extending it even further, deeply embedded inside, not just a browser form factor that Zscaler provides, but also any browser of customer's choice.
Mhm. As you kind of think about this for a minute, we've had shadow IT has been a problem forever and a day, but it's now shadow AI kind of exacerbating that issue even further. And how does the cybersecurity team address that? Because I think, there's a lot of, shall we say, enthusiasm for all things AI these days, but nobody wants to show up at the party and be the one telling everybody that maybe not drink so much punch.
Yeah. So I think the big challenge for security team for a long time has been understanding the footprint of AI. So this is part of our AI launch. We introduced a new capability called AI asset management. So if you look at where does AI live, there is public AI apps. Think about generative AI, which, as I mentioned, we have classification for thousands of apps, but there is also embedded AI, which is inside your websites and things, the day-to-day websites that you're going to nowadays, or SaaS applications. Then there's AI apps on the endpoint. You have users who are downloading AI developer apps, not just developers, but like a user like me is also doing work with Cloud Cowork, for example. And then there are tools and configs sitting on your device, which are connecting to rogue MCPs, for example. So we detect the full app and data lineage on the endpoint. Then if you look at AI apps and infrastructure, there are broad categories such as AI models, there are AI agents deployed either on public cloud or on the user device or on the SaaS side. Then there is apps that people are building to connect with their AI models, and then the MCPs. And then the resources that get tied to it, your data pipelines, there's your source code repositories, your IAM permissions. So we are looking at the whole landscape of this Gen AI, public Gen AI and public AI apps, as well as this AI assets that people are using and building more extensively, and bringing visibility into all of that and looking at data, app, and user lineage of these applications. And as you allow people to use these applications in a permissive way, we extend the zero trust architecture for both AI apps and AI agents. And the browser becomes an important form factor to then enforce that on any of these applications as well on the endpoint side.
Hmm. Um, Are we just waiting for some sort of catastrophic event for everybody to kind of take this more seriously? I mean, do you think that, that's going to happen in the, I don't know, weeks ahead? We see, all these new tools like OpenClaw. Maybe it's only a matter of time now before something that truly wakes everybody up
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, I think we already are seeing that. OpenCloud basically made the art of possible more visible to a day-to-day or layman user, where you can give access. Is not that the tool or the architecture is bad, but it's how permissive you can make your ecosystem to such tools, and they can get access to data, and then they can create attack vectors for you as an individual or for your organization. Like we have seen examples where a AI agent or a tool that was written by a engineering team essentially tried to do a PR request in GitLab and in their code repository, and when it was not allowed, it created a blog shaming that engineering team. So it's just an example of how such attacks are happening with more sophistication compared to where these kind of AI-based attacks will happen. You will close it, but now it goes to the next level of social engineering, next level of compromising end user data and being able to exfiltrate large volumes of PII data, which is a huge problem. So without a proper security framework around AI, these kind of sophisticated attacks will happen more and more. And especially if you think about end users like you and I, one of the bigger problem is user PII and privacy, right? So you need to make sure you have, at least for the enterprise PII data for end users or for your consumer or third-party PII data, you have really strong safeguards around data pipelines and access these AI apps have to your consumer or enterprise data.
Do you think that ultimately auditors, to your point about compliance, will force this conversation? Because once they come around and start looking at what people are doing, they're going to say, well, never mind any new regulations, we're violating dozens of existing regulations.
Yeah, we are already seeing that to an extent. In AI world, a couple of things are changing, right? So if you look at traditionally offensive security, if even before we get to regulators, they have relied on pen testing and vulnerability assessment of web applications and apps that customers have used, like your corporate websites. But those tools, those checkbox-based approaches, and using pen testing on approaches on the AI apps does not work. The whole ecosystem is so dynamic, models are so complex, the multi-turn attack vectors are so evolving. So in that world, you have to come up with a new way to do red teaming. And this is where we acquired a very sophisticated technology last year in November called SPLX that is now fully integrated into our AI security suite of protecting AI apps and infrastructure, teeing it and completely integrating with our AI guardrails product, for example. Now, regulation-wise, there are new regulations on the horizon. If you think about in the US and the US government space, NIST AI risk management framework is picking up a lot of steam. If you look in the Europe, EU AI Act has been enforced and a lot of organizations care for. One of the capability we offer on our AI security platform is we can give customers like a heat map of where do they have lack of compliance in these emerging standards. And this will keep evolving. So regulators are looking at that. Now, the fundamental difference is that following a standardized checked box or checklist of controls, what you're looking for here is a ever-evolving landscape and tools and technologies that help you to take care of those threats and compromises that will make you fail those audits and standards. So we are integrating that as part of the full AI security lifecycle, what we call as AI governance and continuous risk assessment.
Mm-hmm. So what do you see people doing today as it relates to AI and cybersecurity that kind of just makes you shake your head a little bit and go, folks, we need to rethink this a little bit?
Yeah. So I think there are a few things that are happening. If you look at the organization structures, right? Typically, if we go 10 years back, you had networking teams that operated network infrastructure, firewalls, and VPNs. Security teams were responsible for endpoint security controls and security policy engineering. With the convergence of SSE, SASE in the last few years, what we have seen is network and security teams are working much closer to each other. And we are seeing even like networking teams are integrated into setting up secure infrastructure. Security teams are focusing more on policing. So that convergence has already happened. As is broader zero trust platform, we see SSE, SASE as applications that run on this platform. We have extended the same framework for zero trust. So every time we go further, we bring new personas we are working with. So if you think about in the AI world, we have started working, especially with the CTOs organizations who are building and deploying applications. One of the core aspect or principle of our AI security portfolio is that we are looking at the full AI lifecycle management, including when people start building application, they want to do AI red teaming. When they are deploying them, they want to look at the posture of AI infrastructure and data pipelines and code repositories. When they deploy them, they want to do red teaming at a continuous basis, but also want to enable AI guardrails in runtime. So working with your application development, your CTO teams are becoming part of the same ecosystem. So we do think that those organizational boundaries are becoming more and more blurred. And then there's this new role of chief AI officer, whether they sit in the CIO office or in the CEO's office, in some cases CISO's office. We are seeing them driving a lot of AI policies. So good thing is that at least in every large enterprise that we work with, I haven't seen a single customer who said AI, they are not investing in AI. Everyone is investing in AI, and the ecosystem is evolving fast. The model providers are providing basic guardrails, but beyond that, you need a Switzerland of security for AI, and that's where Zscaler is very focused on.
Do you think our adversaries are waking up every morning and just marveling about maybe how much easier we're making it for them? I mean, they got to look at this and go, I mean, how hard is it to create a prompt injection attack ultimately? So they're probably wondering what we're up to.
Yeah. So I think you need to fight AI with AIs, I would say. Yes. So one of the things that we also do, for example, in our red teaming is we try to break your applications through our multi-turn attack prompting to say, if your AI models have basic guardrails and they know, for example, to not give you data about bank interest rates that are rolling out tomorrow, but I can trick the system to give me the range of it or tell me what the bank interest rate would not be. So you need for example, AI security testing solution that's like what we provide. Or if you look at the guardrails that we provide, which are more intent-based, one of the things that the world of cybersecurity is evolving with AI-based attack vectors and how to protect against it is that you need to go away from, traditionally a lot of cybersecurity was signature-based, DLP was regex pattern-based, to more intent and learning-based security. So we, for example, one of the things that we do is we provide a guardrail for off-topic detector or competitive detector in your chatbot communication that you would set up on your website. So off topic for a financial organization, which is settling insurance claims, versus off topic for a car manufacturer, which has a chatbot to services for car sales, are two very different things, right? So that intent and learning that conversation and then being able to deploy guardrails is something where AI is playing a bigger role. Now, attackers are trying to exploit those things through prompt injection and, even more sophisticated attacks like we see invisible text in images that is not visible to human eyes, but machines can detect it, right? So being able to read them and still prevent attacks, and more sophisticated attacks like last mile reassembly, where you're not downloading anything bad, but once the benign content assembles on the user device, it can turn malicious and can do botnet CNC, for example. So those kind of attacks is where we are trying to stay ahead of the attackers by providing controls that can help in the safe usage of AI, but also protect against these AI-based attacks.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that the rise of these AI-driven cyber attacks will ultimately force organizations to rethink their IT strategies and the way they approach cybersecurity? Because I think, to your point, you guys create a fair amount of isolation, but not everybody seems to have appreciated that over the years so far. But will more organizations kind of just fundamentally take a different look at how they do things?
Yeah, I think that transformation is already underway, and we are seeing that in a lot of large customers. I think to your point, yes, it is a bit underappreciated aspect, but we have many large customers who have replaced 70,000 VDIs with our zero trust browser in the cloud. Their point is like, if my end users don't just need to access web applications or supply chain apps, why do I need to give them a VDI or a separate browser? Now, we do understand at times you need a separate footprint on the unmanaged device to understand device posture. Like, does it have a EDR or does it have right user logged in? And that's exactly where SquareX comes in and can fill that gap. And if there is a need to give a full watertight browser, we can provide that too. So essentially, what they get with us is the flexibility either to use the containerized browser in Zscaler Cloud. They can have the extension in any browser, as I mentioned, which is the preferred way people want to continue using their browser with their bookmarks and configurations they have. And in specific scenarios where they want a full browser, we basically have a single license through which we can give them all the form factors. And of course, we have the full agent for fully managed devices where you don't need any of it.
All right. Well, folks, you heard it here. Cybersecurity in the age of AI is never going to be the same. We're not entirely sure how it's all going to play out, but we know one thing: whatever we've been doing in the past probably isn't going to work in the future. Dhawal, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking to you again, Mike.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back here to Techstrong TV. Happy to introduce you to Bob Shaker. Bob's the CTO, CPO, right? Chief Technology and Product Officer over at ActiveState, the company we just had on last month. Their ActiveState security report was out. You can check that out, I think, about a month ago on Techstrong TV, Techstrong.tv. But we're here to talk about something else today. But first, let's welcome Bob. Hey, Bob, how are you?
I'm well, Alan. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Bob, let's start off with Bob, if it's okay. Right? Sure. I mentioned your CTO, CPO. You know, that used to be a bit of a weird thing. How do you do both jobs? But more and more, it's become very common. But how does one, train for that one? Where do you go to become a CTO, CPO? Let's hear about your path.
Yeah, sure. So, I started with my own consulting company and then moved to a large financial where I was the CIO for a decade. The CISO, my apologies. I was the CISO for a decade. Coming out of that, I went to Symantec and held several different roles there, and then ended up in product management, launching a whole bunch of services, and then took on a couple of products. So, I think, going from there to Malwarebytes, launching all their managed services and leading their EDR and endpoint protection products. And then finally, a short stint over at Trellix, and then finally here at ActiveState. You basically spend enough time with your engineering leaders and, as a product leader, do your best to learn what they're doing, how they're running their orgs, and become a close, tight partner. So when product and engineering is super tight, you can learn what it takes to run an engineering organization. I started running engineering organizations back in Malwarebytes, and you just continue to learn and listen and take good mentors and go from there.
Good advice. Good advice. Of course, that was all pre-AI though, right?
Yeah, I guess you could just say, how do I do this job?
Right.
I'm not sure I would fully trust the breadth of the experience and being in the trenches to feel what it's like to be an engineer whose product manager keeps changing focus and how frustrating that can be. So I think it also,
but it talks nice to you, right? I'll say, great idea, Bob. Now we're really going to knock this down. We're tightening it up.
Absolutely. You could definitely have an AI that never tells you did a bad job. That's
but seriously, I mean, Bob, you've been around the block. I've been around the block. I'm talking to so many friends who, haven't looked at code in years.
Yeah.
Right. Who all of a sudden, they get a hold of Claude or Codex or whatever they're using, and they feel like they could build anything, right? And this is going to have an effect. This is going to...
It is going to have an effect. And I think this is part of where ActiveState's kind of making a transformation ourselves, because we see it with our customers, right?
You are already, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we are already, definitely. So, just, I'm not sure if everyone watching will know ActiveState, which is interesting because it's been around for 30 years, but the easiest way to remember them is ActiveState, Perl, and Python. Like, everybody has a tendency to remember that. But we started talking to customers at the cusp of this and AI transformation, and started realizing there's another problem where AI continues to bring in bad components and missing dependencies. And we said, yeah, that's going to keep being a problem. And as much as, everyone talks about AI slop and we have to do more to defend against it. And I just heard a statistic, and I wish I could remember who it was from, that there's already like 30 years of tech debt based on just the AI coding that's been done already. I worry that without the work that we're doing, more and more companies are going to end up a year, 5 years, 3 years in a place where you can't unbury yourself from the amount of vulnerabilities that are in your applications.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things here. First of all, I think when we look at the amount of code that's been generated by AI, let's say over the last 18 months, right? Because it's been, what's actually almost 2.5 or 2+ years now that, when first ChatGPT first out. Yeah. But let's say just over the last 18 months, right? We've seen, as you said, 7 years worth of tech or whatever it is, tech debt built up, right? To me, the only way out of that is you got to harness AI to kind of dig your way out of it, because you don't have enough humans to dig your way out of it. Number one. Number two, I think the good news is again, from what I do, we all mess around, right? But from talking to my friends who mess around with it and people I really respect, it seems that sometime around November or December, so just 2 months ago, with the latest releases of both Claude and Codex in that time frame, we've turned a corner, right? So if the vulnerabilities that human code contains is a pretty steady line, right? Humans, we code, and we don't make perfect code either, right? But if you look at the amount of vulnerabilities per 100 lines of code from human-generated code, it's a pretty steady line when you take into account, good coders, new coders, old coders, young coders, but it's a steady line. When you look at the amount of vulnerabilities per 100 lines of code that you get from your AIs, 18 months ago, it was way the heck up. It couldn't do syntax. It got basic syntax wrong. It got all kinds of... But that line has been going down, and sometime in November, December, they crossed, where the code you are getting out of the AI is roughly equivalent in vulnerabilities per 100 lines of code, but it continues to go down. So
absolutely,
you know what I mean? So down, as time goes on, then all of a sudden, it starts making sense. But, then you get a thing like this Claude Code Opus came out. It found 600 vulnerabilities in existing open source projects in a few days. Right. We're not equipped. We're not equipped to go fix that flood.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like first party code, I'm not even looking at it. There's enough other places. The AI itself, I worry about the open source community. Yeah. I worry about when the AI decides I need open source components, we're going to pull them in. How are they being vetted? How do we teach the AI? I mean, we're using AI ourselves to make sure as we take the new 79 million components that we have in our library, that it's going through them to start making sure, like, you shouldn't use this one anymore. You should use this one. Let's push this one away. and building that mapping so that when our customers come to us and say, these are the 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 components we regularly use, we're able to not only sell them a catalog of all of those, but all the dependencies, transitive and direct, all the shared libraries, and then the constant daily monitoring and update to continue the CVEs going away, which, we have had to create multiple agentic AI solutions to go and keep this motor running so that we can continue the daily upkeep of reduced CVE counts every time the community fixes them, and alerting our customers and vexing them out, and all the work that it takes to manage a curated catalog to make sure our customers and their AI don't have to think about it. So when the AI wants a component, it pulls it from us. And it's clean and doesn't have to think, and it doesn't hallucinate the wrong component or forget to bring in a dependency or bring in a highly, CVE dependency that's full of criticals. And I think that's a key, that's going to be the key spot that our AI engines are going to really be tasked to make sure our customers don't end up with, great written code, but all the open source that it's using to work doesn't have that level of cleanliness and management, right? That's where I'm
of quality. It's a quality issue,
quality.
right? Yeah. But what you just described, I think, is similar to what I was saying. It takes AI to beat AI or to manage AI. How the heck are you supposed to manage 79 million or 75 million?
You nailed it. You nailed it.
You're going to need the AI to do that, but you need the AI to be better.
Absolutely.
Not even as good. I need it to be better.
Yeah, and augmented with humans. So our AI is very, very good, but we don't just let it go nuts and do its own thing.
You can't.
You can't. At the end of the day, we have a team of highly trained professionals that vet every single thing that comes out of it to make sure it hasn't made a mistake. But you're 100% right. I think this is the thing. You and I are both saying the same thing. You've got to have AI there to write the code and bring in the components. And then you have to have, and that still requires humans to validate. Mm-hmm. And you need the same thing on the OSS side, because you can't just hope, right? You can't.
Well, there's a bigger problem, I think, with OSS. I'll talk to you about it in a second. Mm-hmm. But here's what you're describing about having the human, I used to call it humans in the loop. You got to keep humans in the loop. But how do you keep humans in the loop in 75 million instances? That's an awful lot of human in the loop, right? Yeah. So now I think, in my mind, human in the loop is literally, I'm in all 75 million loops, right? But now we need to have a human in the process, if you will, where I'm not, Bob or Alan isn't really going to individually look at all 75 million. There's got to be something that self-selects out of it that says, okay, I got to kick this up to a human, right?
Yep. So without giving away too much, you're obviously reading my mind, and that's very interesting. It means we're on the right track, because that's exactly what's happening, right? Our AI, our agentic AI knows when it needs help, and we have people who are dedicated just to continually making that agentic AI stuff better and better and better. So it does call out to a human to say, "I don't think I got this one right. Right. I'm confused or concerned about this set of components. I need you to come and look at it." And then what we're doing is, in those 79 million components, that's across 12 different languages. So I really want people to start thinking ActiveState, Perl, and Python is the old ActiveState. We are Java, JavaScript, C, C++, Go, R, Rust. I probably missed one, JavaScript, .NET, right? And with the AI being able to kind of take on all of those, our experts are only looking at are able to look at the dump outs. Hey, I, as an AI, have done this. Hey, I, as the next agent, has said, we don't think you did it right. Okay, now we need the human being. Right. And before so there's the internal 79 million that we're working to keep kind of alive and going up to date and staying strong. And then we have our customers who come to us to buy their unique catalog. Like, I need 50 of those, 100 of those, 1,000 of these, like Rust and Go. And then those get yet another layer of deep technical focus from our team. So like the 79 million, you keep those running, you keep those going. So when a customer needs them, you can pull them out and ship them. Once the customer has them, the level of scrutiny goes up. So it's not, you don't need a 79 million people to look at the 79 million components. You need the right number of people to be highly focused on your customers so they never have to think about it. No firewalling out the bad stuff. No, making sure that you have to manually take care of all of it. Our stuff can already do it all for you, and our humans will validate that stuff. And I think you have to have that combination. You can't separate it. Maybe 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now, but right now, and I think in the near term, humans will play a big part in making sure we don't make a huge mistake that ultimately we can't back out of.
Keep us out of the catastrophes.
Yeah.
I think what you just described is how companies have to work today in an AI world, right?
Yeah.
It's affecting it all. Bob, it was a great discussion, man. I feel like we could just, we could have ordered lunch and continued it for the rest of the day, but unfortunately, I gotta run on to our next one. Hey, for people who want to get more information about ActiveState and stuff, where can they go?
Yeah, I would head right over to ActiveState.com. You can see all of the containers we offer. You can learn more about our multi-language ecosystem, our polyglot of components. And, we welcome them to talk to our account teams and our technical staff, because I think once they see what's happening, they'd be pretty excited about removing all that vulnerability from their environment.
I love it. Hey,
Great.
man, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're busy. Good discussion. Best of luck. Keep us posted. That's ActiveState.com if you're interested. It's, what, Bob? It's an interesting time for people like us to be here.
It is.
Right? It's crazy. All right, man.
Alan, thank you for having me on, man.
Thank you. All right. Bob Shaker, Chief Technology and Chief Product Officer at ActiveState. We're on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back. Hey, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel from Techstrong. We're going to continue with this fantastic series we're doing of sessions between some of the leaders at Microsoft as well as analysts from the Futurum Group. In this next session, we're lucky to have Clay Wesener. Clay is the partner for GPM Power App Studios at Microsoft, and Futurum analyst Keith Kirkpatrick. In today's session, it's really a customer success story where Clay, joined by Keith, are going to delve into a real-world customer story. In this case, Wells Fargo, offering a blueprint for leaders ready to scale success in the age of intelligent apps. You're going to see how Power Platform is being used to modernize complex, regulated workflows with Copilot Studio agents and Power Apps. This session will highlight architecture, business impact, and lessons learned from deploying intelligent apps at scale. I think it's really a great session you're going to enjoy. Let's go to Clay and Keith.
Hi. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick, Research Director with the Futurum Group. I cover enterprise software and digital workflows.
Hi, my name's Clay Wesener. I look after our low-code developer experiences on the Power Platform.
Well, thanks for joining me today, Clay. Maybe, Clay, you could talk to me, though, a little bit how Power Platform can actually help these organizations balance that agility to handle these types of scenarios with their compliance needs that often come up when you're dealing with things like banking, or insurance, or any one of these regulated types of processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we within the product, we sort of refer to this as managed platform because it is very much a feature of the platform of how you can govern at this scale. And this has come from, not just us deciding exactly what's going to be in there, but really for folks and customers leveraging low code over the last 10 years and evolving to have a really, really strong governance. Because I think we learned very early on in the journey that if those guardrails are not there, people are just inclined to want to turn it off. And we're very much, I use the word guardrails deliberately. And a lot of the things we do in the managed platform is focused around how do we give you the right controls so you can still enable these types of tools, whether it be building apps, building automations out at scale, but do it in a way with the right sort of controls and guardrails on it. And so like examples are things like data loss prevention. So I can set rules around what connectors and what data you can access versus someone else. And so I can also say how many people you can share an app or a workflow or something with. And so I can sort of mitigate the risk that you might be able to have working in low code versus someone that's received more training or onboarded to the platform. And so typically what we see customers do is sort of implement this zoned approach of, you know, their zone one is everyone in the organization. And they say, you can build apps for personal productivity. You can connect to your office data. You can sort of work with those well-known sources. And you can go and share apps and flows and agents with up to 10 people, as an example. But once you want to go beyond that, we want you to engage a little more with IT. We want to make sure things are supported. We want to make sure that, you know what I mean, we have the right controls, whether that be accessibility on apps or the correct support path. And then what typically happens is we'll then have a zone 2, which is potentially some more sensitive data, potentially, you know, ability to share with more people within the organization. And what folks might do then is they might say, well, this is for our divisional leads or our champs within each group that we've onboarded, we've trained, they understand the platform a little bit more. And then that final zone would be your IT, your dev center, who's working with your really critical data around things like finance and HR. And what we've just started to make sure we do in the platform is give you the right controls that someone can still come to make.power apps, make.power automate and start building. And they're not going to fall into a trap there. They're going to fall into the pit of success because we've put those right guardrails on what they can access and what they can do.
If you look at not just if we're talking about, let's say, agentic technology, but just everything, if you look at the development of the smartphone, everyone expects sort of a consumer grade experience throughout all facets of their life. And I guess that, you know, do you see that sort of pushing or helping to evolve kind of what customer success might look like, you know, not just now, but into the future?
You know, again, earlier in the low code journey, it was always IT departments, development teams that were looking at the low code platform. And more these days, as we're talking to customers, it'll be their employee experience team. You know, it will be folks responsible for actually healthy and productive employee experiences. And that's what I mean. It's not just about cost saving, but, you know, it's about bringing the right tools in. There's the SNCF, the French Railway, are actually a really good example. They run Power School, which is an onboarding school for the whole Power platform when any new employee starts. And this is becoming a really, really common practice that more and more folks are, as they join an organization, they're getting training on these tools, not as something they have to use to do their job, but as a benefit to them to be able to do their job in a more productive way. And I think, again, the consumer push and acceleration of AI is just accelerating that within the enterprise as well.
Right. When you're talking about human in the loop, you raise a really good point, because ultimately this is still new technology, and you want to make sure that, particularly in, you know, you're dealing in a commercial environment, that you don't want this agentic technology to sort of run wild or unchecked. So I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about, have you seen other examples where customers have actually deployed their sort of checks and balances to make sure that their technology does what it's supposed to?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of ways we're seeing folks doing that. One is just in how we define and build the agents and the tools themselves. While that agent has the ability to issue refunds, it can only do them up to £100. So it has very specific guidelines built into it that once it goes over certain criteria, loop in a human, send them an approval workflow so that they can approve this, review the details. So that first one is just very structured, giving the agent details. The other side, and this is where we've sort of really seen how apps have evolved in the last couple of years. If you've been looking at what we've done with Power Apps, we've introduced this concept of an agent feed, which is really about in the same UI that you would come into the app and do your day-to-day work, you start getting this feed of activity from the agents that are in your digital team effectively. And so you can start seeing where they're completing actions, where they might need assistance, or where they're getting blocked. And so what we're starting to see there is even our UI patterns of what we traditionally thought an app is starting to bring in this agentic behavior to give, that human in a loop and that oversight capabilities. So I still want someone to have a really clear view of what tasks are being completed by the agents, what's being completed by AI. And in that view, be able to get into the reasoning, understand the logic and sort of the thought process that the agent followed behind it. So it's not a mystery of why something progressed or why an action was performed. But as the human responsible managing that team of agents, I can effectively go in and see why it did something. That might be then come a teaching moment for the agent where we correct that behavior or change it for future cases as well.
Well, it's really interesting you mentioned sort of the generational shifts that are going on. We're seeing the, entry of these, I guess you'd call them AI natives, coming into the workforce where they don't know anything other than a world with AI. And I guess, that kind of begs the question, we've heard so much about AI in the past, particularly the last couple of years. Can you talk to me a little bit about, what role can AI actually play within customer success? Because, it's a wide, AI has so many capabilities, but I'd just be curious to see if we could boil it down to this function.
Yeah. I think it honestly depends on the customer and how they're approaching it. One of my favorite examples of, I think, sort of scale and pace, PG&E here in the United States, they're a big Power Platform user, and we talk about scale. I think they estimate since they started their journey in 2021, along the lines of like $38 million in savings that they accrue to the Power Platform, like huge in terms of scale. But so much of actually what they've implemented is not just cost efficiencies. They introduced an agent called Peggy. And they actually have a nice little avatar for Peggy that they introduced across the organization. And Peggy now handles, it's between 30 to 40% of their IT help desk calls. So built in Copilot Studio, Peggy has access to their knowledge base, all their policies and documentation. And just Peggy one agent, they estimate saves them about $800,000 a year. And it's absolutely transformational. And so even with the savings they were getting on the Power Platform between apps and automation, there's a limit. Mm-hmm. There's a limit to how much productivity that can drive. Agentic, tools and what people are able to build in Copilot Studio has really just broken through that barrier. And, you look at, again, someone like PG&E, when they implemented Peggy, it was very simple, looking over knowledge bases, access to information. It helped a large volume of sort of tickets that would come through the help desk that used to be a human replying to an email or replying to an IM. Those humans now are actually providing much higher quality support on more technical cases. They're not helping someone log into Citrix for the first time or point them to something that's really well documented. Peggy's able to do that. But then they've also continued to evolve it over time. And so again, one of my favorites that Peggy can do is getting folks that get locked out of their SAP accounts. one of the most common things that IT apparently happens thousands of times. And now Peggy, using an integration between Copilot Studio and Power Automate, can actually open up SAP and go and unblock that person's account for them after they interact with her on Teams. And so this was something that was critical to an end user to get unblocked really, really quickly. Peggy's able to do that for them fast, but it wasn't high value from an IT support team and what they were really providing. Them going and opening up an account and unchecking a blocked checkbox. And so I feel it's a really good example of where they started simple. They focused over sort of knowledge-based examples. They evolved it into actions, but it's something where they've gone for a high volume, cost inefficient area. They've applied agentic AI to it. And that's something that, go back 3 or 4 years ago, would have been an extremely expensive tool to go and implement. Leveraging LLMs and leveraging Copilot Studio, they've been able to do all that in low code, which is super impressive.
I'm curious, one thing, Clay, that you alluded to earlier is if we think about how apps were previously developed and rolled out, it was IT who kind of managed that. Now what it sounds like what you're saying is we're getting to the point where business leaders or even folks who are working within departments may be able to actually launch apps or launch agents, obviously with that human in the loop and with those, specific guardrails. Are you seeing any kind of patterns emerging in terms of, customers who successfully scaled this agentic automation from more of a grassroots approach as opposed to springing from IT?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, we sort of see it approached from both directions, and some customers very deliberately approach it from one or the other to start with. I actually, of all the examples I've sort of talked about today, do quite well balancing both spectrums and both ends of the spectrum. Sorry, and I think that's where you start getting the real value multipliers. PG&E, great example. I talked about Peggy earlier. That's an IT or centrally led tool. It was about optimizing a process within the IT team. But at the same time, they have thousands of developers across their organizations. And when I say developers, I mean low-code citizen developers that are enabled to go and build apps, to go and build agents, to go and build automation across their team. And they've sort of very deliberately focused their center of excellence, their digital transformation team, on a few core objectives. So that's the team that sets their governance policies, make sure it's scalable. And then they also support and train those different sort of divisional leads across the company. PG&E actually, again, I think they're on the spectrum, the end of the spectrum where they're doing this, in a really amazing way. They have a conference every year called Level Up now, where they actually get together all their citizen developers and those divisional leads from across the company to come together, share stories, share learnings, and sort of explain new technology. But it starts becoming a real cultural tool in that they're enabling people to go and solve these problems, make themselves and their teams more efficient. And there's reward that comes from that. They're getting folks together, they're getting a lot of learning. And so I think, while lots of companies are enabling citizen development, the ones where we see it's truly being successful, they're bringing this level of evangelism to it.
Well, Clay, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of these platform features that are kind of critical for managing customer success initiatives, because it really seems like, there obviously you have the human component, but there's also the technology side in terms of making sure there are the right tools in place to help organizations, address all of these issues.
There's obviously the human and technology component. I would also say there's just the practices and sort of learnings. We actually have some good documented platform guidance out there of what are the best practices in thinking about this zoned approach that I was talking about, and in how people can sort of apply different levels of control to different parts of the organization. I would say then we start looking at the specific technology. One, a lot of those guardrails just light up directly in the product. So as a new citizen developer, as a maker, when I go land at any one of the Power Platform tools, I can get welcome guidance with links to internal learning, explanations of where I can go to support. I get routed to my own personal developer environment. So I actually have a sort of controlled, dedicated environment for me to go explore in, to experiment in. I'm not sort of working in prod. I have the ability to be controlled. And then things like pipelines, which effectively are a low-code ALM tool, so that once I do build something, I can either use it for myself and my personal environment, but if it gets to the point where it does make sense for it to be deployed somewhere centrally, leveraged by others, I can go through an automated deployment process where the right checks go. I have an AI advisor that reviews my code, makes sure my apps are secure and performant and accessible, and then get the right approvals before that gets deployed. And it's really that mix of, we want to democratize, we want to make these things available to everyone across the organization, but then have these right built-in tools so that you don't have to go read a wiki to find out what's the process that you should follow. It's built in to the developer tool. So I kind of just, as I start building, get guided to the right environment. I get guided to use the right data. I get guided to share it and deploy it in the right way. And all of that we bundle up and sort of leverage within that managed environment, which gives the admins, the IT, the central digital teams that control centrally to sort of set up those tools and that content that they want available across the organization.
It sounds like all of these tools, really underscore what you were talking about before, which is this culture of trying to utilize technology in a way where it's deployed at the right time, in the right space, and with the appropriate guardrails, but while still fostering a culture of experimentation and ensuring that people feel empowered to use these new tools.
You're absolutely right. Like the cultural, I think when we talk about your first question about like, what's the new definition of customer success? I think it's the customers that have implemented the right culture and it feeling like it is a culture of empowerment and experimentation, not not something that they have to fight really hard to get access to. Because that's where a lot of these examples where we have customers turn around, they've built something that's ended up saving them millions of dollars. It came from the expert that was involved in the business process. It didn't come from a central team. And to get that creativity and get that ideation, you need to give people access to these tools. And, we sort of regularly, I regularly reference, Jurassic Park, life will always find a way. And I think, so will users, so will makers, they will find a way. And to restrict these tools, to hide them, folks will go find a tool on the web that can help them be more efficient in their job. The companies that are doing this right are making it part of their culture to provide those tools and just really enable people from the get-go.
The technology is probably going to be more accurate over time if you're talking about trying to, really assess, images and differences between them. But, one of the other things I'm really curious about is how can agentic AI and all of this technology be used in regulated industries? I'm thinking in particular financial services, banking, insurance, where, there's a lot of complex process, but you also have to be mindful of all of the regulations that are attached to those industries.
Yeah. It's actually quite surprising, I think, in this technology shift with AI, compared to when we moved to the cloud, compared to internet, compared to a lot of the others, I think actually the regulated industries have actually been quite a lot of the front runners on this. EY, for example, built PowerPost, which helped them with their financial processing, sort of end of month processing. They built this as a sort of typical low code application. They're already looking at how they bring agentic checks into it to make sure that things are being posted into the right period, that they have the right information. Again, time consuming sort of manual checks. Wells Fargo have rolled out agents to more than 4,000 branches. A huge, huge number. And they targeted a process that was around their branch forms and procedure management. And this is something that was particularly time consuming. So if you went into a branch and said, I need to set a power of attorney, or I need to open an account and, under maybe a non-traditional circumstance, there's a huge amount of internal documentation around those procedures, the right forms, the right information to collect. And before, that would mean as a customer is standing there with the branch member, they're looking up that information, trying to go find the right procedure, going to find the right form. So a heavily regulated scenario, but also really impacting a customer who's literally standing in front of you, waiting, maybe on their lunch break, trying to get through the bank really quickly. And so they rolled out an agent, across all their branches to actually manage that forms and procedure scenarios. And so that now in the branches, those employees are jumping straight onto an agent, talking about the scenario that the customer has and working with this agentic AI to basically get guidance on the right forms, the right procedures to follow. Even in these regulated industries, they're seeing the value in AI. And I think it's more about how they do it, making sure they have the right checks in place, making sure they have the right guardrails, rather than what they probably would have done 5 years ago where they just tried to turn it off.
We talked a little bit about, potential friction there, but are there any other sort of potential hurdles that organizations need to be wary of? And what's sort of your take on the solution?
Like most things, we talked about human in the loop, making sure you introduce this technology in the right way to organizations is really, really important. I mentioned EY earlier. They were really, really successful in, after building PowerPost, which helps them manage their sort of end of month financial processing. It simplified it. It brought in some agentic behavior to validate quality. And they had huge gains in efficiencies in both. I think it was 70% in sort of the time, or 95% in lead time to get things posted, and about a 35% cost saving for them. So real sort of impact to the efficiencies of their users. But what they did really well was, once they built that tool, they told that story. They evangelized it. And so they helped people understand that this is how this technology was helping them. This is how it was implemented. And that not only made, obviously, people a lot more receptive to onboard and leverage the technology, but it also started driving this ideation of other things to go improve within the organization and using similar technology. A lot of these companies are not coming in and doing a full low code approach of apps and agents and automation and reports all on day one. Where we're seeing folks be really successful is they're leveraging the composability of the platform. They're starting with, for example, they might have a legacy application that's inefficient for a user. So they go and use an app. They build more efficient, streamlined UI over the top of that. That's an incremental solution they can deploy, they can get out to their users and start seeing benefits. Then on that same app, they can go and add automation. They can start getting approval workflows. Then they can start bringing in agentic AI, getting that automation and that AI behavior, incrementally building these solutions over time. And it's very much, intentionally how we've designed the platform, in that these are not all or nothing solutions. And, back to our earlier conversation, pace is extremely important these days. And people don't want to go do a 12-month waterfall project of every requirement met. They want to find ways to incrementally build. And by leveraging a platform that has common governance, these tools are designed to work together, apps with automation, with agentic behavior, integrated into Copilot with that unified platform.
So essentially, you're setting up a framework to enable organizations to really drive these best practices in terms of making sure that, yes, you are implementing new technology, but you're doing it in a thoughtful way where you have the right checks in place, and you really are making sure there's other things that you need there. You need the audit trails. You need to make sure that when you do a project, you're going back and you're actually assessing, does the technology achieve the goals that we set out to when we deployed it?
Exactly. And I think it's that there's two parts to it. One is that being proactive. So as you're releasing a new app or a new agent to the organization, do you have the right controls around it, the right guardrails from the beginning? And again, our goal is let's have the right framework, the right tools, the right guidance to go really enable that, and let an organization tailor those guardrails to sort of accommodate their level of risk, what they're comfortable with doing. But then on the flip is make sure we just have the right visibility, the right auditability, so that as you're leveraging AI more and more within the organization, it's really transparent about what it's doing. I think one of my favorite things with Copilot Studio, and Pets at Home is a great example of this as it's interacting with customers on customer service. You can go into any step through any sort of run or action the agent has performed and understand its thought process. Why did it do this particular step? What were the inputs? What were the outputs? What were the reasoning? And not just understand it, but then also help teach it to handle sort of moments in a different way in the future. And I think having those sort of tools from a governance perspective just built in. Again, we talk about it being unified for the developer, unified for the end user, but also for the admin, so that they're doing in this sort of a central and controlled way. And even then, whether you're building an app, an automation, an agent, you've got that composability across the platform, but I don't think admins really want a super composable admin story. They want that to be a lot more unified and controlled. So, it's bringing the blend of those worlds of let's bring together multiple technology, multiple tools, but make sure then you sort of have one central view of how it's all coming together.
If you want to really drive the use of new technology, you need to do it in a very stepwise fashion, using a platform that allows you to unify people, processes, technology. It doesn't make any sense to try to do it in a very disjointed way. You won't have the governance required to do it safely. You'll confuse people in terms of which tool should I use, which approach should I use. Ultimately, it really does matter to make sure that you have a unified way of approaching the implementation of new technology. It's also really critical to make sure that as you go about your journey, whether it's implementing low-code processes, implementing agentic technology, to have a clear understanding of your business goals. What outcomes do you want? How are you going to measure them? And then how are you going to take all of these different learnings and then streamline it so you can actually apply it and scale it over the enterprise, not just for today, not just for tomorrow, but well into the future. And finally, I think the most important thing that kind of resonated with me today is you need to look for a trusted partner, trusted technology partner to help you through this journey. Agentic technology is very new. Low code, yes, it's been around for a while, but there are still quite a few pitfalls that can be out there. To go it on your own can be very, very challenging because you have all of that risk of potentially opening yourself up for errors, missteps, and of course, there's that, we talked about it a little bit today, regulatory concerns. It makes a lot of sense to partner with a company that has experience working with other enterprises to deliver these types of benefits using that new technology.
Hey everyone, I'm Alan Schimmel of Techstrong, and welcome to our next session here at Predict 2026. We're very lucky and blessed to have the Futurum advisory analysts available to us here at Techstrong as being part of Futurum, and we are delighted to be showcasing their predictions, their thoughts, their analysis of what this year brings. Our next analyst in the hot seat is, well, it's not that hot, is my friend Brad Shimon. So for those of you following along at home, you've got Schimmel and Shimon here. No, we're not the new competitors to H&R Block, but we are going to be talking about some interesting things around AI this year. Brad, welcome, and thank you for coming on for Predict 2026 this year.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Alan.
Yep. Brad, before we jump into your predictions, there are probably going to be people in our Techstrong audience Predict here who are not familiar with you and a lot of the work you do. If you wouldn't mind, take a couple minutes and give them kind of your background and expertise and maybe some of the most recent stuff you've published, some of the most recent content.
Yeah, sure. So Brad Shimon, I'm the VP and practice lead for data intelligence, analytics, and infrastructure here at Futurum. That's a lot, right? So there is a consistent theme throughout that, and it's data. So I basically adore all things data. I can safely say that in 1990, when I was working at the university supporting the English lit students in using the VI editor, that the first day I saw an ASCII art of Jerry Garcia, I was hooked. And it's been that way for me ever since. I've been, literally from that same year working, either as an analyst, a business analyst, or a developer, or a systems administrator, or a journo. So I love tech, and it's very much, like I said, my pleasure to be chatting with you about some of the stuff I think is gonna have a nice impact next year.
Absolutely. It's funny you said that. I brought me back when I was a little boy. My mom was a data entry person for a large real estate holding company, management company, and that ASCII text. Remember, it used to print out on the dot matrix printers kind of thing, and she would bring home ASCII text, pictures. And it got me too, because I wanted to learn how to do that. And that was the first, this is going back, this wasn't yesterday, Brad, but that was the first exposure I had to programming, and everything else was how to do that stuff. So
nothing's changed, Alan.
Nothing's changed. Here we are.
Boot up Claude Code or Gemini CLI, and you'll get the same ASCII art that you would have had in 1980.
And I'm still fascinated with them too.
So true. So
the
true.
3D aspect of it. Okay. But Brad, let me just mention, if you go to futurumgroup.com, you could catch a lot of Brad's most recent research and analysis, and I encourage you all to do that. Not right now. Let's wait and see what Brad has to tell us about. But Brad, really, we've got 5 things that you're keyed in on for the next year, and I'm just going to jump into them. And they're all under this guise of look, 2026 is going to be the year of acceleration. And I'm hoping you're going to explain that. And we could start off with intelligent, as we get into the whole data management piece of it, intelligent AI-driven caching and how that's going to play. But Brad, why don't we start with the year of acceleration and then jump into the caching issue, or the caching prediction?
Yeah, I know what you're all thinking. It's like, well, acceleration, we've been talking about that for years now. And what I mean by acceleration is actually, moving from potential to production. And by that, I mean focusing on speed, scale, and accountability. And basically what I think we're going to see this year from for my research practice is an answer to one question. And that is, if it doesn't scale or save money, it gets cut. So I think we're going to see a massive focus on, well, what is going to get me what I want without costing an arm and a leg? That's really what we're going to see drive most decisions this year.
Yeah, that's interesting, Brad, because I would categorize 2025 as the year of experimenting, a lot of the projects that I think we've seen, well, if you listen to the MIT study, right, 90 or 95% had no impact on revenue or anything. Discounting that, look at the Wharton study, some of the other studies out there. But I know just from my own subjective talking to people, there was a lot of experimentation going on. Jerry Garcia would be proud.
He would.
Yeah, but there wasn't a lot of tying that to real ROI, to real, real business. So you're saying 2026 is the year we tie it to real business objectives and real money.
Yeah.
Either
I don't
saving
even
money,
think,
making money, something.
I think it's not even the objectives that's the biggest concern this year. I think it's we know the objectives. We know that we suddenly have this magic lever called agentic software that can, automate processes that we thought were intractably non-automatable a year ago. And the problem with that is that if you do it, you can do it right now like that, and it will absolutely break the bank unless you manage it carefully and you focus on, how do you get data to the models in the most effective means possible? And that's what my first prediction's really all about, man, is, we saw less than a month ago, actually a couple of weeks ago, IBM bought a streaming software provider that basically was the creator of Kafka, and that's called Confluent.
Yes.
And they bought Confluent for a small penny. And the reason
11
why,
billion, wasn't it?
it was 11 billion. Yep. The reason why is that it is critical. What we see, if you thought that AI was all about prompt engineering last year, you would have been partly right, but now you'd be totally wrong because it's all about context engineering. And the problem with context engineering is moving data in an efficient manner to get the models what they need to make the right decision at the right time. So IBM bought Confluent to focus on the streaming data aspect, but there's another aspect that we don't talk about a lot. And it's actually one of the things that goes on every day when you use a computer. Did you know that when you type something or a program executes that there's like gambling going on in the background, Alan? It's like
I'm shocked. Shocked.
Exactly.
Well, what do you mean by that, though? For those of us at home who may not
it's
recognize
like ideas like speculative execution, speculative decoding, and basically ideas like right now, the new one is semantic caching. All of those are about trying to predict what the model or the software might be doing next, and then doing that without having it confirmed, because it turns out there are just common patterns. And if you just lay your money on 21 black, it's likely to come up more than you think. And so it saves money. And so it's not just about streaming data. It's about how do you manage that cache? So the cache that sits in front of those models for those agentic processes. So I feel like next year, we're going to hear a lot of words like cache hit rate. Every time I log out of Gemini CLI, for instance, it tells me what my cache hit rate was. 60% of what I did was pulled from cache, which means I didn't have to pay for it. That's a big deal. And that's
absolutely
drive a lot of what we build this year.
So 21 black is my favorite roulette number. I got a great story I could tell you about that, but now's not the time. But caching is another thing. Brad, caching is not a baby of the AI generation, right? Caching is, and predictive caching is something we've tried to optimize, So I helped take a company public in the .com when we were hosting Lotus Notes and PeopleSoft and Oracle apps, and there was no cloud. People were on T1 and T3 lines. It was a very different world. Caching represented an automagical way for us, right, to make it, not the World Wide Wait. To try to get you the data you were looking for. And if we did it well, it was a game changer. And if we didn't, it kind of sucked. But, and then I'll never forget, I was once given an assignment by my friend Brad Feld to go check out a company they were looking at investing in called Akamai.
Oh, yeah. CDNs.
This is going back a little while.
Yeah.
And, as part of that, the whole caching thing, right? And predicting what to cache, in that case, it was a lot of graphic stuff, heavier stuff. But it made all the difference in the world, obviously, right? If you could move that forward, if you could predict. And so, caching has been sort of an unheralded star of the internet and of our usability for years.
Oh yeah.
But what you're saying is now AI takes it to another level.
It does. Like the ideas, like you say, are old. Like we've had key value stores forever. It just happens to turn out if you put them in a memory, in-memory database like Redis and use them as the memory pool for an agentic process, kind of fast, kind of efficient.
Yeah, it makes a difference. But at the same time, Brad, and let me just push back on you a little bit. We're having all kinds of trials and tribulations around how can we get this infrastructure up? How can we power this infrastructure? How can we cool down this infrastructure?
Space.
Yeah, well, it's the final frontier. But beyond that, I mean, so now when you start talking about putting more memory in, more cache into active memory, like Redis databases and stuff like this, does it put more straws on that camel's back of how do we get this infrastructure up to speed?
Yeah. Yeah, I saw from one of my colleagues a prediction that agentic was going to break databases this coming year. And, given the databases were created back in the 70s when we had very little infrastructure to work with, they were built to scale and be concurrent at the time. And so it's really not a question of can our infrastructure handle it, meaning the database and the storage. We have like heavily optimized systems like you get from HPE and Oracle and Dell and others that take vertical integration to new heights. And you see those guys implementing like some of the databases that we see associated with generative AI, like vector stores, and putting them in the storage layer itself because wow, that is
graph.
Yep, same with that, exactly. So I feel like the challenge that we face is really the architecture of that last mile of how you get the data to the model and where. And that's why you see ideas like RDMA in the data center for being faster than Ethernet to basically have a shared memory pool across a whole boatload of GPUs, let's say, and you don't have to pay that penalty. It's all going to be about how you scale the movement of the data, not the basic reads and writes of the data as we go this year.
And that gets back to the very first thing you said about, hey, these things have to pay for themselves. They have to earn their keep. And if we could do that, and I don't want to use the word tricks, but if we could use those sort of tricks to do that rather than relying on the raw horsepower that these GPUs generate, well, that's got to be a cheaper way. Right? A more let's not call it cheaper, a more efficient way.
More efficient
of doing that.
Yeah, we've been doing it.
You think that's going to be
right?
And it's something that's not new. Something it's tried and proven.
Yeah, well, the basic algorithm that we use to find the local minimum, for a loss function in a deep learning neural network, for instance, is basically just a calculation that says what's the most efficient route to get to the answer, and that we do that everywhere. We do that in all, like we said, you would be surprised how much gambling's going on all around you, and it's because these optimization tricks, are at hand, and you can use them in surprisingly new ways. And I guarantee that we'll find in 26 new ways of optimizing that data movement, for instance. We saw it with, you remember how we were suddenly talking about taking really large models and scaling them down with different fidelity, from FP16 to FP8 and 4. And wow, did that make a difference? Did we think that was going to be the case? No.
You talk about space. This reminds me of, this is the kind of nuts and bolts stuff, how NASA can still operate spacecraft that are 2 decades, 3 decades old, running on, 286 or younger or older chips.
Yeah.
These little incremental little tricks, and techniques in there, incrementally, but you add them up, they start making a difference.
That's just it.
All right. Yep. That was excellent, Brad. Let's go to number 2.
Yeah. AI shepherds. That's my second prediction. We've been talking about this for a while within the data professional realm of those who are tasked with maintaining databases, maintaining data pipelines, building dashboards, all the things that help businesses make decisions with data. And we've talked a lot about how text to SQL, for instance, is getting really good right now. And we can basically help these professionals to take a more business oriented view of their job as opposed to a very reactive, low level view. And that trend is going to continue, of course, because it is getting better and better. But my view is that we're not going to fire them. We're not going to minimize their numbers. I think instead we're actually going to need more of them, because these data engineers, these data analysts, other professionals working with this medium understand the business. And they understand and we'll talk a lot more about that as we go forward in our chat today. But they understand what business meaning is for something like year-end close. They know what that is. They know where it lives. They know how to get to it. So I think we're going to see this rise of what I call the AI shepherd, which is instead of a data engineer, you're basically going to become what I call a validator, a curator, and a adjudicator of what AI does for us. So the practice of basically hooking up to a database, building a pipeline, and monitoring it over time, these people aren't going to be building and managing that. They're going to be managing the outcomes of that. They're going to be using their intent to declare what they want the AI to do, and then adjudicating how well it did.
So is it fair to say they are the humans in the loop?
Yeah. Over the loop.
Over the loop.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. You know what, Brad? You win the Good Guy Award. You're the first analyst out here who's come up and said, hey, I've got a way we're going to make more jobs with AI, not less jobs. And that there's a lot of people out here who will be encouraged by that. But I think you're dead on, though. I do think you're going to need those sort of shepherds, and shepherd's a great word to describe them, to look over the flock.
Yes.
And have them pass underneath the staff, right? And make sure they meet our needs and the quality and all of those other things.
Yeah, and guess who the sheepdogs are? That's your agentic AI processes. Those are the sheepdogs.
Right. Our digital co-work
exactly.
sheepdogs.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to think of like Oliver the sheepdog every time someone mentions agentic AI to me. But
you're welcome.
Yep. But that I think that's a good dead-on one, and it's encouraging. Let's go to number 3, Brad.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so this is one I got wrong. We're never wrong.
Well, you got a whole year for it to prove itself out. Maybe there's hope yet.
Well, this is a response to what I got wrong in the first half of the year, because I was dead set on, companies really doubling down on data, what I would call data intelligence platforms, meaning a highly integrated, best of breed or best of need solution from a vendor that did what you needed in a easy to use, easy to consume, affordable, and above all, highly secured, governable way. And that's still, very valuable. But what's changing is that we've shifted from, the need for an all-in-one platform to a much more composable data stack. And that's happened because we've had a bunch of really disruptive new technologies entering the marketplace. Plus, we've standardized on standards like, the eponymous, Apache Iceberg for data formats, and those two in hand. If I can basically have a Parquet file, which is what Apache consumes to use, and I have a DuckDB database that I can basically install with a pip command in Python, and I can query that directly, or I can bring in some fancy query engine like Trino or something, also through a single command, and I can do what it used to require a full-on data platform to do. why wouldn't I do that? You know?
Yeah.
So this composable stack is like really catching on and influencing what people buy, what they consume, but it's also influencing the data platform players themselves, which we'll actually, I think, talk about in one of our upcoming ones. But it's going to be all about interoperability is going to be the key going forward. So you're going to basically be trying to say to people, or sorry, the market is saying to people, forget a boombox. You don't need a boombox. Let's go back in time and think about the hi-fi stereo system where you bought the best components and they actually plugged in together and worked because of open standards like the open semantic interchange, the model context protocol, Iceberg and Parquet, as I just mentioned, and all of these are just making it so that me, the data practitioner, can plug in what I need, when I need it, where I need it.
So my experience over the years, Brad, is the pendulum always swings that way first. Let's call it best of breed, and I want the best of breed to work together.
Yeah.
And then at some point, though, especially if economic times get tight, the pendulum swings the other way to, I want one throat to choke. I want, I'm willing to do less of best of breed if my overhead is less and my total cost of ownership is less. And no matter how good we've been in the past at integrating things, making APIs and stuff before then, using multiple tools, multiple vendors always seems to wind up costing more from a total cost of ownership perspective.
It does.
Than the one, right? And so I'm thinking, in light of what you said in the beginning, where really we want to squeeze every dollar out of these things. How, you mentioned earlier, this is when you might have got wrong. Has that sort of early market sort of working itself out, right? Shaking out the wrinkles. Is that at play here? And we're seeing a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think it's really because not just the standards, but because they're built on open source projects, data science in particular, and more broadly, data analytics have long been influenced and driven by open source projects. We were talking about Kafka, for instance, with data streaming earlier. And the beauty of those is that it's not just to empower software developers or ISVs to build on and then redistribute that code, in their own branding, but rather to ease the integration into a system. It's because they are easier to adopt. You don't have a year-long sales cycle associated with them and contract negotiations and audits every year, for instance. For a lot of these, you still have a lot of energy you have to put into it but they are a little easier to integrate when you have a lot of them. And so when we asked, actually, in our survey we did mid-year about why data professionals like open source, it was the top reason was ease of integration, how easy I can bring this in. So that's why I think it's not that we're totally wrong about highly integrated systems being valuable and saving you money, but it's by bringing in this new set of tooling that is open, and doing so without a lot of effort and cost, makes it so that you have optionality, and that's what enterprises really value over a lot. Is am I getting locked in here? How hard am I locked in?
The anti-lock-in. Look, I think that's something we've really seen rise over the last few years and will continue. Totally. No one wants to be locked into a single LLM or a single model or a single stack. And more power to them. I think it also plays well for open source. The fact that the company behind Kafka went for $11 billion is a statement as well. Yeah. Hey, Brad, we're running a little low on time, but I want to give our last 2 points their due. So let's run over to point 4 if it's okay.
Yeah, well, we can just combine them because they are closely interrelated. And so, as I
Right.
mentioned, Iceberg 1, we like open standards for all the reasons we just mentioned. Why do we care about Iceberg? Why do we talk so much about this things like semantic caching and context engineering being so important? And why that single source of truth I mentioned with what something means, what does year end mean? That is like the grail that we've had in the data analytics and AI world for some time. How do I, as a company, know what my data means, and what does it mean from department? The marketing department to the accounts receivable department to the sales department to Chicago to California. What is the single source of truth for that? And we've had, I think a number of experiments and investments over the years where we've tried to do ideas like master data management to really kind of get a grip on that for governance and accountability or for auditing. And those are important and they continue, but we found as an industry that there's a perhaps better way to really sort of get there quicker, and that's using metadata. So if you have information about your data, like, this is what this column name actually means in this database, who made it, who has access to it, what is it tied to, what is dependent upon it. All of those things are really tied up in the meaning of that data in the enterprise. And you don't have to put everything in a data mart to make sense of that. You can leave it where it lives. It can be in Salesforce. It can be in Snowflake. It can be on, anything on top of AWS or Google Cloud or on premises. The trick is to put it in something, and that something is typically a data catalog that we see so many vendors basically giving away. Databricks, a company that is no stranger to open source, and also one that's valued a little highly. They have a lot. They're worth a lot.
To say the least.
Yeah, they're very, very influential, and they give away their Unity catalog. Why do they give it away? So that you'll put data in it, so that you can actually make use of this thing. And it is extremely useful because what we're trying to get to as an industry, you know how the concept of continuous development and continuous deployment with CI/CD pipelines and trying to view software, in a way that's more governable, manageable, scalable, blah, blah, blah. We want to do the same for data. Wouldn't it be great if we had Git for data? Where you could branch,
That's an
merge,
interesting concept.
version, right? We got there's Project
But
Nessie.
can't you do that with Databricks and Snowflake and today's modern data tools? You could kind of chronologically version these things and so forth, and snapbacks and all that.
Yeah, you can. So if I'm getting audited for a decision an LLM made on August 1st, 2024, you can find out what the state of the data was, the state of the model was. All of that can be done now. It's just not easy to do, but in some industries, kind of important.
At an LLM wide level, that's pretty massive.
Yeah. So what that's all building toward, man. Sorry to cap off that prediction is, we're trying to build toward a semantic layer, and semantic layer is basically if you're right now, if you're just putting an LLM in front of a data warehouse, even if it's through an MCP server, you are just waiting for hallucinations to take over because it doesn't know what that column name means. It doesn't know where it came from and what it actually means in this department versus that department. So the semantic layer is now the top goal for both the companies that are playing in the space and the enterprises that are building on top of them. So talk to anyone in the industry that says, I want to build a semantic layer, and they'll all say, oh, well, what does that mean? Well, I want to build a safety net for myself. I want guardrails for myself. That's why they're doing it. So they can say, when I run an agentic process, that it's using data in the right way. When my MCP server comes back to an agent and says, oh, I've got the quarter close numbers for Chicago for sales, that you can trust that it is what it says it is. That's what we need.
And that's the semantic layer. So Brad, I don't pretend to know anything near what you know about these things, but, in talking to people, one of the things I'm hearing is the LLM has to sort of be at the back of that process, that we do need our own data, whether you want to call it an SLM or some vectorized RAG out stuff, or whatever name and moniker you want to put on it, that data that has that tribal knowledge, that has that departmental know-how, has to be accessed first, if you will, before we fall back to the LLM. Is that part of this semantic layer as well?
That's exactly what the semantic layer does. But what I want to counter propose to you is what if the model itself became that semantic layer? What if it could represent that tribal institutional knowledge? I remember I was 2 years ago, actually, shockingly, we've been in this agentic era for a couple of years.
I mean, yeah, you thought it was maybe a long time ago. It was just 2 years ago.
Right, just 2 years. IBM did some research that they published, and their chief researcher I was at a conference and he was speaking, and he said, that he thought an LLM should be that representation of the company, that face of that institutional knowledge. And do you know how you do that? You basically train the model on your data from your company. But everyone's so caught up in these frontier scale models that are not quite large and very difficult to really kind of fine tune. Well, how do you do
like that? Yeah.
So you see, like a month ago at their annual conference, AWS actually came out with this new tool called Agent Forge, which is basically you can have access to their Nova models and you can fine tune them to basically represent your company, to represent the meaning of your data. I love that.
I mean, they positioned it as almost creating your own LLM, if you will.
It is. That's exactly what you're doing.
Customizing your own LLM. Yeah.
That's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, was that
Agent
it was
Forge.
Nova
Forge.
Wasn't it? No,
Nova
Agent
Forge.
Yeah.
We'll look it up.
Brad, I'd love to talk more with you about this, but we've got a full day of Predict 2026 to show these people. So
enjoy that.
And we're over at 30 minutes. But for people who want to follow you, stay up on all these great things you're working on, what would you recommend to them?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn at Brad Shimon, all one word. And I'm obviously, I publish on thefuturumgroup.com. So you can go there and find everything I'm writing. We're quite open as a company. We do gate content. Yeah, but we really try to get it.
Not just executive summaries, a tease, and now you got to pay $3,500 or some of the, you get some of these analyst terms. Most of the research is out there for people, and you can grab it. It's a good thing.
Agreed. So Alan, thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's been our pleasure. You've added to the tapestry of Predict 2026. We've got a lot more predictions and look aheads to come. I hope you've enjoyed Brad's session. We've got more. I'm Alan Schimmel. We're out.
AI-generated content is bad. Data centers are bad. Microsoft says MCP is good. Lassoing an AI agent. AWS says AI coding isn't bad. Beam me up, T-Mobile. And we're going to look into private power networks in this week's episode of the Tech Field Day Rundown. Hey everyone, welcome to the Tech Field Day Rundown. It is February the 25th, and I hope that you're all staying warm with a nice big bowl of clam chowder. Yeah, that's what day it is. Clam chowder. Who knew it needed its own day? But you need your own day to be able to keep up with the news. And you know what day that is? It's Wednesday, because that's the day that we come out with the rundown. And that is the day that I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Alistair Cook. Al, it's good to see you again.
Always a pleasure to be here with you, Tom. And as you know, I like my nuts covered in chocolate. And so today is National Chocolate Covered Nut Day as well.
Yeah, you know what? We are all about the food here on the Rundown because it is the thing that we subsist on that allows us to bring you all of the great news that we are uncovering, digging through by hand. Because, we want to bring you the most curated, artisanal, handcrafted news that we can find. And we're going to start off with a recent story because on Monday this week, the 23rd of February, 2026, privacy regulators worldwide working through the Global Privacy Assembly issued a joint warning about AI tools that create realistic images and videos of real people without asking for consent. While acknowledging AI's many benefits, they raised concern about harms like non-consensual intimate images, defamation, and risks to children. The statement urges organizations to put strong safeguards in place, be transparent, remove harmful content, and work closely with regulators so that innovation does not undermine privacy, dignity, and basic rights. This sounds like a very laudable goal. Al, do you think anybody's going to listen?
You know, I doubt it. And that's disappointing because this absolutely is a very laudable goal because, as we know, deepfakes, bad. Lots of harm has come already to people from fake content being created, and we're seeing increasing the use of fake AI-generated content to push a narrative that is not necessarily truthful. And so there is absolutely a problem here, but I'm not sure that a joint statement from a variety of underfunded privacy regimes or privacy agencies within a variety of small and large companies around the world is going to make a big difference. Absolutely having some ideas that there may be legal issues with deepfakes around the world, and we know lots of legal frameworks are really struggling with keeping up with the capabilities of AI. The frameworks that we have are based around humans taking action at the speed of humans, not AI generating terrible fake content at the speed of AI. So there's some real challenges to be seen. And this is just a sort of beginning framework ideas of you need to have strong safeguards, you need to have meaningful transparency, you need to have accessible mechanisms for takedowns of harmful content. And well, won't somebody think of the children? We must also be addressing some of the specific risks towards children, age-appropriate content being delivered for children, and also appropriate content being generated about children. I like that there is a global group of privacy organizations. I particularly like that New Zealand's Privacy Commissioner is one of the signatories to this piece of work. But so far, it's just saying, yes, there are bad things out there and you should take steps to not do bad things rather than anything that'll make a difference, because of course the almighty dollar is what's driving people to do these deep fakes, create this content, or also that maybe there's also bad people out there in the world, and bad people won't follow good guidance, will they? This just feels like a lot of hand-wringing and not a lot of action to me. I think it will be important as we move forward in life to consider that not everything that you read, not everything that you see is truthful. Of course, here at The Rundown, we bring you some handcrafted artisanal truth, not some AI-generated truth. As the 2028 presidential race takes shape, Democrats are dialing back their strong support for AI after voter backlash over rising energy bills and job losses. Governors like J.B. Pritzker, Josh Shapiro, and Wes Moore are stepping away from generous incentives for power-hungry AI data centers to bring money into their constituencies because their public are concerned. Strategists say that these projects now symbolize wider fears about AI. Pushing candidates towards tougher rules, local approval, and fair taxes, with skepticism spreading across both parties, and calls for worker protection increasing. The era of automatic political support for big tech's AI, the expansions of maybe this support is coming to an end. Tom, is this really going to put a crimp in the growth of AI data centers?
It could, provided enough of these governors get together and say, not in my backyard. Because the companies that are looking to expand these data centers and build out this infrastructure, they need access to specific kinds of things, right? They need high-tech infrastructure. They need access to water. They need a clean power grid, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And a lot of those are in places that right now are being governed by people from the Democratic Party, people on the left of the American political spectrum. That's not to say that they can't build some of these things in places that are on the right of the political spectrum. But one of the biggest things that's coming out of this is that people are starting to wake up and realize maybe it's not a good thing to build a giant data center in the middle of my constituency, because the power is going to go up. We know that, right? The amount of power consumption is going to increase significantly, and that means that everybody's electricity bills are going to be going up. It also is, quite frankly, an eyesore. I don't want a giant warehouse just sitting in my backyard. We've seen this a lot with Amazon fulfillment centers. We've seen this with a number of other things that get built, and they don't really bring a lot to the table. Now, before anybody leaves a comment and says, well, it's going to bring a lot of jobs, how many? And more importantly, what kind of jobs? Because I think it's going to be a lot of people who are working on the server farms. That's not something that your average hourly employee can really jump in and do, which means either these companies are going to have to import their people from other states, which is typically something that does happen, or they're going to have to spend a lot of time spooling that up, which means there's going to be fewer jobs available for the amount of resources that are being consumed. And that is a problem for people. That would be a problem for people, except for the fact that you're also supporting AI, which is purporting to take people's jobs away. So I think people are not only rejecting the data center itself, they're rejecting what's going to be housed in the data center. You know, this isn't a data center like Apple's building out to house more iCloud storage. This is big, big stuff. So I think what we're going to see is that towards the end of 2026, that there's going to be a little bit of a pushback. You know, maybe we're not just going to give you all the energy and resources that you want. And then that will kind of determine what happens in 2028, whether this build out's going to happen, whether the AI balloon will deflate a little bit, or whether or not Lex Luthor and Brainiac and the rest of their crew are finally going to be able to launch data centers into space. Yeah, don't hold your breath on that one either. Engineers over at our friend Microsoft are building MCP servers and saying that it's very different than building an API gateway. Sharing some of the lessons from their work on MCP servers for Visual Studio, they explain that agents perform better when tools are simple, opinionated, and designed around real workflows, not overloaded with API options. By reducing context switching, limiting tool choices, and using built-in feedback to guide agents, Microsoft found that MCP servers can help developers complete tasks faster and more accurately. Their takeaway: designed for how agents think and act and not how internal APIs are structured. Al, this is just earth-shattering news that sometimes you have to build things for the way that people think and not give them every option in a Coke freestyle machine, right?
Yeah, it's a interesting perspective. I mean, I'm looking at it as an architectural precept. You know, the idea of having an API gateway historically has been, we'll bring together all of these disparate sources of interaction with our applications. We'll bring them together into this gateway, and we'll provide access to everything. Every possible way you could interact with our IT systems will come into this API gateway. You can use it as a library of things that your application can talk to. Now, human developers are really good at ignoring the fact that they are provided access to 15 things they don't need to use, and to retaining that. Whereas AI agents, and this is one of the things I took out of the Microsoft blog post on this, AI agents will want to go and look at all 400 things they have access to and work out which one to use. And will typically do that really frequently. And so they get very overloaded with options. They're kind of like a 2-year-old when you say, here are the 15 things that you could have for your snack. They get a bit lost and can't cope. When you zero it down and say, in fact, here are the 2 snacks you're allowed to have today, which one would you like? They can make much better decisions. And in this way, AI agents do seem to be like 2-year-olds. You need to direct them a lot. Reading a little bit along the way in here, the Microsoft team built a specific way for AI agents to talk to their documentation. So rather than having read it any way you like. What Microsoft did here for this MCP server was build an interface that allowed basically two options of getting to things: go search or retrieve a specific item. And they very strictly controlled what the AI agents could do in order to access this information. So that's a good thing. It's that nice simplification. But then we started reading a little more through this. And there's elements in here of their lessons of expect things to not work the way you thought they would, and that you have to change things dynamically over time. And this is not some fixed piece. It's not going to work all the same way. Because if you change a little bit of the description in your MCP server's interface, the AI agents are going to come to a different conclusion about how it works. So I've now got to write my descriptions to suit the agent that's going to access this MCP server, but different agents are going to make different interpretations of my description. So now I need to have different MCP servers for each of my agents. Hang on, haven't we just lost the whole point of having MCP when it gets this complicated? Maybe the promise of MCP is not quite as great as we thought. And then there's this whole idea that iteration through this, that you can have problems with hard-coded configurations in agents. Agents will remember the way things work a couple of days ago sometimes, and will continue to work that way. Yeah, this does seem like a MCP is not the silver bullet to all of our problems with working with AI agents that maybe we've been led to believe. Still feels real early. Much more work to be done here to turn this into an easily usable product. Lasso Security has introduced a new capability, one designed to track and analyze agent behavior and helping organizations apply stronger guardrails as agentic AI use accelerates. We've seen the need for more guardrails around agentic AI, particularly all of those clause that you might be thinking of, the open ones. The feature called Intent Deputy establishes behavioral guidelines that allow security teams to detect misconfiguration and drift and malicious activity in real time. According to OfferDraw, the tool analyzes full session histories to ensure AI agents act only within their authorized purpose while adding minimal performance overhead. As AI agents inherit broad permissions and are deployed faster than security controllers can keep up, Lasso argues that continuous behavioral monitoring will become essential to limit damage meet compliance requirements and prepare for the increased regulatory and audit security as we hear of more and more security problems with agentic AI being given excessive permissions. Tom, does this give you hope that we'll be able to put a lasso around our agents and keep them under control?
Lasso? Deputy? Hang on. Partner? If you want to keep an eye on all those potential bad hombres, you need to know exactly what they're doing at all times and make sure it's squared with what they used to be doing. Otherwise, you're going to have to lasso them. You're going to have to throw them over there in that there jail. And scene. I kid a little bit, but like this to me is kind of what we should be doing with AI agents, right? Is we should be analyzing what they're doing, setting baselines, and then looking for what happens when they drift. Normally, when we do this in security, we're looking for indicators of compromise, right? I have taken over a process and I'm going to use it to send information to GPT, APT, YPT, system out there. But in this case, I'm looking for the agents to drift away from what their guidelines are, right? Because this is the problem that we've run into with some of the latest revisions of agents. There was a story that just broke this week about how someone at Meta gave one of those bots access to her entire email, and it decided to clean things up by deleting everything, even after she specifically told it to stop multiple times. It's like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. Sorry, my bad. With Lasso Security and their deputy system, basically what they're doing is they're saying, here are your guardrails, act within your guardrails, and we're going to keep a close eye on you to make sure you don't drift away from it. Because what that does is it allows you to know almost instantaneously when there is a problem. And it allows you to make sure that you're always in compliance. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that's great because, if I'm going to deploy these AI agents, I don't want them to do anything crazy because I don't want to have the increased workload of having to clean up after them. No, that's not what you need. You need to be able to show auditors and regulators that you didn't let the AI agent loose and do things that it really wasn't supposed to, especially if you work in an organization that keeps things like medical records or financial transaction records or, any kind of PII that would possibly be leaked out there to the internet, and that would be bad, right? Because in the words of Stephen Foskett, if you make a smoothie with strawberries, you can't reconstitute that by getting the strawberries back out of the smoothie. That wasn't related to an AI thing. It was something a little bit older, but that's really what happens with these models. Once you've put all those units in there, you can't extract them. And so you really don't want that data to leak in there. And you don't want those agents feeding things they're not supposed to, or, acting in ways they weren't tasked to do. So I hope that Lasso's solution is one that gets adopted. And at the very least, I hope it gives people a moment to pause and think about what they really should be doing with their data, as opposed to just letting those agents run wild like a gang of hooligans. Our friends over at Amazon, they've had their fair share of some issues, but they're disputing reports that internal AI coding tools were responsible for some of their recent service disruptions at AWS. Following coverage by the Financial Times, the company said that a December outage stemmed from good old-fashioned human error and not access control issues or AI autonomy, despite involvement of internal coding assistants like Kiro and Amazon Q Developer. Amazon emphasized, bolded, underlined, and italicized that the incident affected only a limited cost management service in one region and did not dispute core AWS infrastructure. Still, events have intensified debate over AI governance, permissions, and guardrails in complex enterprise systems as companies accelerate the use of autonomous agents in production environments. So, Al, is it a good thing that this wasn't caused by code, but in fact, people who didn't know what they were doing?
Well, maybe. But here's the thing. Before Kiro was let loose to do its thing automatically, this fault occurred, that the excessive permissions existed. And they weren't causing an outage with the existing permissions. So there'd been a mistake made, excessive permissions, and then Kiro comes along and exploits those excessive permissions. Who's to blame? Both of them, right? Both Kiro taking these excessive permissions and making changes in a production environment. Now, it's a fairly common kind of behavior in a cloud-native application. When you need to deploy an update, you tear down the old one and you build a new one. Well, not quite. That's what you do when you're in non-production. When you're in production, you build a new one, you switch the workload across and then tear down the old one. And as I'm reading between the lines of what's described here, it sounds like the non-production methodology was used in the production environment here by Kiro. The fact that Kiro was given enough permissions to be able to do that, absolutely, that's an error of excessive permissions along the way. But Kiro really exposed a couple of things here, not being sufficiently aware that it was working in a production environment to take production methodologies, and just that it was a multiplying effect of having an existing fault. And we know system outages seldom have a single cause, right? We build our systems to cope with a single failure, and it's when there's multiple failures or multiple errors being made that we end up with system outages. Kiro exposed a fault, but it also was at fault itself. So I think saying that it wasn't the coding assistant, it was the excessive permissions, is splitting hairs here. If the excessive permissions had not been not been in place, Kiro might not have been able to do what it did. But if Kiro hadn't been running there wouldn't have been so much of a consequence of the excessive permissions given to Kiro. The other use case they talk about was Amazon Q, which is the plugin that I keep getting asked to update in my Visual Studio Code. And that in that case, there was no user visible outage. That apparently Amazon Q did something somewhere and made an application not work quite right internally, but not to the extent that it caused an outage. What's the root in this? Well, one of the things is that AI moves faster than humans do and has no idea of the context of what it's doing if you don't provide that context. And so it's a little bit like handing the intern the keys to whatever system they're working on. So you give them the keys to production, they can mess up in production. Yeah, this shared responsibility for security continues to extend here. We know that excessive permissions is a normal part of operating an environment on cloud. This is just the way the reality works that doesn't quite match up to the architecture diagrams that we get really on. We do need to think about handing control of our wider systems to our AI tools and to put the same controls around those AI tools that we would have put around any of our other systems. Deploying changes out into production, well, those changes should have gone through all of the staging and testing, and the correct methodologies for deployment into production should have been followed. Kira should have been provided the information about how you deploy out into production and not treated it like a deployment out into a test. Hey, maybe there was just a tag set on that particular region for that particular service that called production test, and so Kira was exactly following instructions. It was mistaking. Yeah, that'd never happen, I'm sure. Be careful what you let your AI do. It's the same as letting an intern do the same activity. Be very careful. You should also be careful of quantum teleportation because it's now left the lab. It's not quite escaped the lab in the way of a disease that's going to infect everyone so much as having a field try. Deutsche Telekom and Connect successfully demonstrated quantum teleportation over 30 kilometers of live commercial fiber in Berlin while it was still carrying normal internet traffic. So commercially available hardware and commercial network connectivity provided an average teleportation fidelity of 90%. I'm not quite sure what that fidelity means. Proving that quantum networking can operate in real-world telecommunications environments. This milestone brings the quantum internet closer to reality, enabling future breakthroughs in secure communications, distributed quantum computing, and quantum data centers. Tom, are you certain of your state or your position?
Neither. Both. Hey, was that a cat? Okay, yeah, quantum mechanics it's like table reading, at least for Natasha Romanoff. But the thing you need to know about this is that they were able to teleport data across a link 30 kilometers in length while that link was carrying other normal traffic. So that fiber was noisy. One of the biggest problems about bringing quantum teleportation and communications networks out of the lab and into the real world is you're not in a lab anymore. So you have to contend with watts of issues. And that 90% fidelity rating basically means that they were able to get the data across the link 90% of the time. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, 90% sounds good. Yeah, it is. It's also 2 orders of magnitude more loss than we would expect on even the worst link that we would be using in any kind of production environment. If you guys suffered 0.1% packet loss on your link, you'd be screaming at your ISP to fix it. So we're not there yet, but we're proving that it can be done. And this is not easy because in order to do this, you have to entangle particles on either side of the link. And you have to introduce a filter in the middle to make sure that only those particles are traveling. You have to make sure that you get the entangled particle over there. Now, when it works the way that it's supposed to, they instantaneously appear on either side of the network across any distance. And the 30-kilometer link is important because in a modern network that is carrying traditional data across a fiber at 50 kilometers, you have to have a signal booster or repeater in order to generate the signal to be able to send it to the other side. So if we could have that happen without having to build those repeaters in the middle, that's big for people. And this is absolutely the forefront of secure communications. I could spend the next half an hour explaining to you why that is, or you can go to techfieldday.com and search for quantum networking. And there is an amazing video from Tim Zaghetti of Cisco talking about this. He uses tennis balls to explain how you entangle particles, and he helps people understand why it is absolutely secure to be able to send entangled particles over a medium, because to Al's joke, once you observe the particle, you've collapsed the superposition, and now everything is done. So brush up on your quantum mechanics, kids, because you're going to need to know that for the future of computing. All right, let's take a closer look at a story that involves, well, what people hope would be unlimited power. As artificial intelligence drives unprecedented electrical demand, Major tech companies are increasingly bypassing traditional power grids by building data centers with their own on-site energy generation. Across the U.S., firms like Meta and Oracle are turning to natural gas-powered behind-the-meter facilities to avoid long grid connection delays and rising utility costs. According to research from CleanView, dozens of these projects are already in development. Supporters say that self-generation eases pressure on strained grids, but critics warn of things like higher emissions, reliability risks, and rising costs for public utilities, signaling that AI's rapid growth is beginning to reshape the nation's energy system as much as it is the technology sector. So, Al, maybe it's a little bit different in New Zealand, but up here, data centers seem to be wanting to gobble up all this power. But now that they can't get it as reliably as they want, they're going to start building their own generation facilities next to them. Is that a good idea?
Yes, absolutely it is. Provided you have something that's going to be the source of energy for that generation. Here it's natural gas. So now you have to build your data center close to a natural gas pipeline or a somewhere that's extracting natural gas. So it changes from being you need to be on the wires that deliver the power to you need to be on the pipeline that delivers the power. It doesn't take away the need to be close to somewhere that you've got the source of energy. The thing that does shift is the idea of using those micronuclear plants that we talked about in the rundown last year and that don't seem to be any closer to happening. Modular nuclear is still the research project. But fundamentally, yes, this idea of doing your generation of all of your electricity on site at the data center seems a great thing. One of the things that historically data centers have always had was a ability to continue to operate when the grid disconnects. And so there'd be generators and there'd be UPS systems on site in order to continue operations when the grid goes away. Well, what about if we start with those as the primary sources? You know, we've got to have them there anyway. They've got to be big enough to support the workload, the actual maximum load of the data center. Why don't we just use those? Historically, they've usually been big diesel generators, but gas power supply in or some other source of electricity. Here in New Zealand, a lot of our electricity comes from hydropower. So I can imagine building a big data center next to a hydro dam and just plugging straight into the generator floor. No transmission losses, real efficient use of the power that's being generated. Be a bit of a concern if something went wrong with that dam and your data center got flooded. But maybe you put your data center a little bit uphill. But this idea of generation close to consumption is a really good thing. We talk about food miles of generating or growing our food close to the people that are consuming it. Well, what about power miles? That's definitely loss. And it also helps us with this idea of having impact on the local community. We were talking about this in some of the pushback earlier of communities not wanting mega data centers next to them because it'll increase the cost of utilities, particularly power. Hey, but there's one thing missing from the story: water, cooling. All of these massive data centers need cooling. How are you going to locally generate your cooling without using some massive supply? Tom, I think the real story that's sort of been buried in this is how do you keep these damn things cold over time?
Oh, we just launch it into space, right? No, we don't do that. By the way, check me out on Blue Sky. I actually linked to a great video from a guy named Kyle Hill who explains why that's this really stupid idea. Another reason that Kyle Hill is a great person to follow, especially on YouTube, is because he really is a nuclear physicist. So he understands the challenges of using nuclear power. These things are hard to do, right? Like, we've known that for a long time. That's why we've never built a power plant next to a data center. Here's the problem that I have with it, though, because more than any other thing, when you build a facility that's going to consume a lot of power from the grid, you pay for that power. We know that because there's a utility bill. I don't even want to know what the electricity bill for your average data center looks like, but I'm sure it's astronomical and has lots of commas. But when you pay that bill to the people who generate the power, do you know what they do with the money? Okay, do you know what they're supposed to do with the money? They're supposed to use it to upgrade their facilities. They're supposed to be able to increase power generation. They're supposed to make it more reliable. They're supposed to explore ways to create power generation facilities that have a lower cost per watt so that they can make money off of it. And we've seen that through the use of things like solar and wind and hydro. Do you know what happens when the companies who are consuming massive amounts of power don't pay for it from the grid? Yeah, you guessed it, kids. There won't be any grid upgrades because when it's just Ma and Pa Baker's house that's running off of the grid, we don't pay enough in electrical consumption costs to be able to do that. Worse yet, you think these plants are going to be running at 100% capacity at all times? I bet you they build a slightly bigger plant than they need with the projection in 3 to 5 years that they'll consume more resources. But what do you do with the power generation? Because you can't just shut these things down when they're, producing a certain amount of power. Well, how do you handle it when you have a solar array on your house that's generating power all the time and it fills the battery on your power wall? Oh, you sell it back to the utility company. Oh, well, now I have a facility that's generating power and it's dumping it back into the grid, and that's better for everybody, except now the utility company is paying for the power that they're not maintaining, which means your rates are going to go up because they have to pay for that power. And more than likely, what's going to happen is either a scheduled expansion is going to be delayed because they don't need it anymore, or they may just cancel it altogether because, oh, well, now that we have these extra natural gas plants that are throwing an extra 100 megawatts onto the grid, we don't care. This is the typical late stage capitalism playbook of, publicize the losses, privatize the profits. And so we're privatizing a power plant to get this thing online. And then maybe if we can cut a deal with the utility company to make the power cheaper to consume than it is to run this, then we'll consider buying from them. But that means that the price per watt is going to be so low that they can't really profit from that to increase the grid. And then everybody's utility cost is going to go up because there's more power being generated and dumped into the grid. And ultimately, everybody is going to lose out. Because what do you think is going to happen if they built this small plant to get things running until they could get a grid connection? And then when the price of electricity goes past a certain point, they're going to disconnect from the grid and go back to using that and expand that plant too. Look, I get it. This is Harvard Business 101. This is how you operate something. But you're dealing with an electrical utility, and utilities should work differently than everything else because they're for the greater good. And I know that those two words are a very foreign concept to people in the industry today. I don't care about effective altruism. Sometimes you have to lose a little bit of money on something to make everybody's lives better. Now, I know that AI companies are no stranger to losing massive amounts of money. But rather than investing it in hardware that needs to be built up, year after year and buying out the entire flash storage and RAM market for the year of 2026, why don't you spend a little bit more money upgrading power plants so that everybody can consume that and pay for it and we're all better off? And oh, by the way, you might get to run your GPUs this year. Just a thought. Well, you know what else is a thought? That Tech Field Day thing that we do, we're not ranting about the news every week. And the next event that we have coming up is one that involves data centers and all kinds of fun stuff. And Al, that one's right up your alley, isn't it?
It is. I'll be returning to Silicon Valley for March the 11th and 12th of Cloud Field Day. This is the 25th Cloud Field Day that we're running. It's definitely getting to be a mature experience. I have a great panel of delegates coming out to join us. A couple of new faces. I'm looking forward to meeting some people I've never met before. Also, at least one brand new delegate on their very first Tech Field Day event. That's always fun. Looking forward to Hammerspace and to VMware by Broadcom as our primary presenters. And I'll take a little look at some more of the things that Future and Research does. Maybe we'll have somebody else also as presenters coming up for that. So watch us wherever you find good Tech Field Day video, which will be on techfieldday.com as well as across our LinkedIn and YouTube channels. Of course, I don't have an exclusive on those channels as well because, Tom, you're going to be returning to the area as well.
I am. I'm going to be at RSAC this year, and I'm going to be bringing some Field Day friends with me. We're going to be having Tech Field Day Extra at RSAC March 23rd and 24th, Monday and Tuesday of the show. We got great presentations from Veeam, ObjectFirst, and Commvault. Stay tuned. We might be adding some more names to that list very soon. We're also bringing in some friends from the security space. I'm going to be meeting up with some folks, probably even talking to some companies. If you want to check out what we're doing there, make sure you go over to techfieldday.com. I'll be there. We'll have some fun. And then I will be back April 8th, 9th, and 10th for Networking Field Day. That is a jam-packed event. We have a ton of sponsors. We have a lot of delegates, some new faces to the crowd. In fact, I was telling somebody the other day, I finally got to invite somebody that I met at in the tech space about 20 years ago. So it should be a fun time for everybody involved. But you know what else is a fun time is the Rundown. Every Wednesday. New episodes, new news. You don't want to miss it. Check out YouTube for all the latest. You can also subscribe in your favorite podcast application of choice if you'd rather get the audio version. We stream this on Techstrong TV and on all of our other Techstrong Future Group programs everywhere, whether it's the Security Boulevard podcast, the Tech Field Day podcast, all the things that we do. We're going to be back next Wednesday to talk about all of the IT news in the week that was, as soon as I can get that generation facility built next to my house. Until then, for me, for Al, for everybody here at Tech Field Day, we hope that you have a great day, and we'll see you next week.